It is rivalry week for the Ohio State Buckeyes. The biggest game in college football kicks off in just over 24 hours. We could not possibly be more excited for the return of the game after not having this game a year ago because the pandemic canceled it. What does this game have at stake for both teams? It's pretty obvious they're going to win a Big Ten championship, or at least play for a Big Ten championship, and a spot for the college football playoff. But what does it mean beyond that? There's so much more to talk about here with Ohio State and Michigan kicking off Saturday at 12 noon. We'll give our prediction toward the end of things and give you a nice thorough preview of what to expect coming up here this weekend. Ohio State and Michigan. Doesn't get any bigger than that. We've got a big show for you planned. Hope to have you all the whole way through right here on Buckeye Breakdown. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Breakdown. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with our coach, Tommy Zagorski. Before we get further, Tommy, happy Thanksgiving, brother, and hope it was a good day yesterday. Hope it was everything that Thanksgiving's supposed to be.
Same to you, Brendan. We always know Thanksgiving's not about how much is on your plate, but rather the depth of your gratitude and the blessings that you have. So hopefully everybody got to celebrate those yesterday, and not just yesterday. Celebrate it today. Celebrate it tomorrow. Continue to celebrate it. We're all blessed, and I think sometimes we don't take enough time to be grateful for the true gifts that are in our lives.
Totally agree, man. Keep Thanksgiving in your heart all year long. It's a good way to live your life and be grateful for the things that we have, for sure. I am especially grateful for having a chance to be a part of this rivalry, a very, very, very small part. But my gosh, it is so much fun to have a chance to look at the two best teams in the Big Ten this year, to have this game, feel like it has the buildup all week that the Ohio State-Michigan game should have. For a Michigan team that has never entered this rivalry under Jim Harbaugh in its previous 5 iterations, they've never entered with a record worse than 8-3. And yet I feel like the fact that this year's Michigan team has exercised the demons of the 2020 season. They obviously didn't play the Buckeyes, but had just an absolutely terrible season. The fact that everything is on the line for Michigan and Ohio State going into championship season, and the fact that both teams are coming off of really good performances, it just fuels, all those butterflies you've been feeling all week, thinking, is there a chance that the Buckeyes could lose? No, yes. And you fight back and forth with yourself. It's been so much fun this week to think about what Saturday at noon is going to hold. And so I think it's fun to have those normal rivalry feelings, back in our lives again.
Yeah, absolutely. The Buckeyes joined in hands yesterday as they ate turkey together. And, while they're eating that turkey, there's this disdain for the team up north. And as they're thinking about this, and they work towards it, and Ryan Day's, echoed this all week. This is something that this program works on every single day, 365 days of the year. They work towards this. This is why you come to Ohio State. This is why you have the opportunity to play in the greatest rivalry in all of sports. It doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. This is it. Michigan, Ohio State, somebody who's never seen a game of football in their lives. You could go across the seas and you say Michigan, Ohio State. They're going to know what that means. It's just something special about it. And this is where a lot of these players cement their legacy as great players in this rivalry, and on both sides of it. You're going to go through this and you're going to watch. Michigan's going to put out their hype video. Ohio State put out one. I got chills when I watched it, with the Jim Tressel talking about, we're going to be great in the community. We're going to be great in the classroom. And you're going to be really happy with these guys in Ann Arbor, 300 some days or whatever from when it was. And just to show you that they understand it. And I know Ryan Day's been asked a million times this week about the rivalry and growing up in New Hampshire and living in the colonial Northeast. He knows what this is about. If you love college football and you love competition and you love rivalry, a lot of these guys played against each other growing up in high school. And it used to be just really Ohio and Michigan kids. But now it's legitimately the entire country. These are kids that played against each other in California, that played against each other in Florida, that played against each other in Texas. All are going to be able to play, right up 23 and have that opportunity to have such a great rivalry this weekend. And, it's exciting to see Michigan have such a great season. And I say that because it really makes this game much more intriguing. Like you said, Brendan, they haven't come in with less than 8-3, but to be able to come into this game, a top 10 team, realistically, a touchdown called back in the first half of the Michigan State game at the end of that half probably changes the makeup of that game a little bit. You're going in up 2 scores with a team that really doesn't have the ability to throw the football well down the field like Michigan State. Who's not to say Michigan takes that lead and then never looks back? And realistically, we could be looking at this game right now saying that they're an undefeated team. I don't think anybody on the outside is saying that this team is worse than Michigan State, even though Michigan State did beat them head-to-head. But I do think it's going to be a great game to watch these players. And the one thing that's really interesting for Ohio State, I think Thayer Munford's the only one on the offensive team or on the team that has started against these guys. There's so much youth in this Ohio State team. And to see Thayer, who's got 45 starts, Thayer's been playing at Ohio State. I think he blocked for Joe Germain, but he's been around forever. And it's to see that and have that ability, it's going to be really exciting to watch these guys compete on Saturday.
Obviously, Chris Olave has played some of his best games against Michigan, but you're right. The number of guys that have just, whether they've started or played some role. The Buckeyes with such a young or inexperienced team on the whole, I'm certainly not discounting the experience they've built up throughout the course of this season, but there's a lot of guys that haven't played in this game before, or at least not played meaningful roles in it. And you're right, it's going to be really interesting to see how those guys can, keep their feet underneath them and deal with the intensity and the pressure that's probably a bit overwhelming at points. You bring up Jim Tressel, and I think this is where everything started, for the recent history of this rivalry. Since he took over in 2001, Ohio State has lost twice. They're 17-2. And one of those 2 losses was in the midst of a coaching change. They have essentially completely dominated Michigan football over the last 2 decades. And you get the sense just based on some of the things that have been said in Ann Arbor over the last few months, but obviously, this week, they've been trying to take this rivalry, this game far more seriously, much like Ohio State's been every single day working on things to beat Michigan. It sounds like Michigan is adopting a similar mentality. I'm not sure why they didn't have that mentality in the first place, but, that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is Ohio State, has been working for this game all year long, and this game means everything to them. And you've got a Buckeye team that certainly feels like they got a pretty good shot of going up to Ann Arbor and scoring a bunch of points. Why don't we start on the offensive side of the ball for the Buckeyes? Because everybody wants to talk about, C.J. Stroud, the Heisman candidate. We will get into awards season snubs here in a bit. Let's just talk about what to expect on the field first. The Ohio State offense and the Michigan defense feels like the matchup to watch because Michigan's defense has been really good this year. The Buckeyes clearly right now statistically have the best offense in the country. It's really not close. And I think a lot of people are going to see, okay, can the Buckeyes move the ball against a good defense, or can that Michigan defense, can they slow down an elite offense?
Absolutely. And Brendan, one last thing about Michigan, to not think that in the walls of their facility, they don't worry about this game and talk about playing in this game all year long. They can't say it publicly. Sure. If you're that bad over the last 20 some years and you just say that you've been working towards this, like I'd be embarrassed to say that. That would be like right now looking at me saying, I train for a marathon every single day. Like I've been training for this marathon every single day. Like it ain't happening right now. Like it's just not happening. So like when I say that, you look at me and you go, all right, yeah, cool. Like good move, like great investment of your time there, Michigan. But no, offensively, it's going to be a different game for Ryan Day. He's not dealing with the Don Brown blitzkrieg, cover zero, man defense where they're just like, hey, we're going to get there. And I think Ryan kind of alluded to it this week when he said that Mike McDonald's defense is more of an NFL defense than a college defense. So that's his direct quote. And what he means by that is you're going to see Mike McDonald, he's going to mix up these coverages for Ohio State. You're going to see a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4. You're going to see a lot of quarter, half. They're going to do different things right now to try to disguise their coverages the same way Matt Barnes has done since he took over as the defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes, and try to create confusion for Ohio State. But where Ohio State's really going to have the opportunity to attack this Michigan defense is going to be into the boundary. This defense has struggled into the boundary all year. Boundary and bunch sets. So when you have multiple players into the bunch set, so for example, 2 stacked receivers or a 3 stacked receiver, that is when this team has really struggled. They're going to get intense down the splits, and I'm doing this with my hands, and people are listening and not watching, and they're probably go, what's he talking about? You're going to see, snug and tight splits 2.5 yards from the tackle with the receivers. This is where they really struggle in coverage. And this is where you saw Maryland last week kind of pick them apart at times, where they left some stuff out there. Unfortunately, they missed some throws. Michigan State the same way. And then really in the run game, Ohio State likes to run the duo play where they bring a receiver in or they disguise it whatever way they're going to do it. Big sets have been an issue, 12 personnel, with Jeremy Ruckert, Kate Stover, for Mitch Rossi, whoever it's going to be, for the Buckeyes that's going to be in that realm. It's going to be hard for them to be able to defend the run and defend the pass against Ohio State. And we've seen this every week. Teams pick and choose their battles. Ohio State also has the ability to get into the counter game. And you watched Maryland last week, their most explosive runs were a tackle wrap play. So what they did was early in the game, Aiden Hutchinson, the defensive end, who we'll talk about, who's a very good player, kid out of Divine Child, who grew up a Michigan fan. Like, this is his Super Bowl. This is going to be the biggest game of his career. Going into this game, he knows his legacy depends on this game as a Michigan Wolverine. And what they're going to do is they're going to play him wide and stand him up when he's to the boundary, if there's not a tight end to that side. When they stand him up, it gives him the flexibility to play under the tackle or over the tackle and let that linebacker kind of fit off of it. That's how they're going to try to defend the counter game. But what Maryland did, they came back with a tackle wrap play where they brought the tackle from the tight end side. They kept the grounded tight end on the backside, and they only wrapped right back through. And the counter action with the back's alignment, because you watch their linebackers. Michigan's linebackers are going to align based on the alignment of the running back. This is really important. If Ryan Day decides to start putting CJ in the shotgun and put Mayan Williams or Travion Henderson in the side cart next to him, that alignment is going to dictate the alignment of those linebackers. They play based on it. You watch them, and they've really played themselves out of it. And that's why that counter action has been really tough. The other thing that Ohio State does that a lot of teams don't do in the Big Ten as much as they used to is also under center. Setting up the play action under center with the different actions that they can work with. And I think that's going to be important. 7-man protections as well, to be able to just kind of secure the edges and really let C.J. Stroud set his feet and pick apart this defense. Now, their secondary's good. They're not great. They're a good secondary because what they do, they benefit from a great pass rush. They're stout inside. They're really strong. They're going to move those guys a lot. I think they're going to let 55 and 97 take off on the edge. Those inside guys, though, they're going to twist those guys. They're going to blitz them. They're going to walk up linebackers. They're going to try to disguise stuff. They're going to drop those guys. They've been getting more into it where they start dropping 90, I think his number is. One of the defensive tackles. He's a thicker kid, but he runs pretty well. They're going to drop him. They're really confident. Mike McDonald's really done a great job taking over this defense that was, abysmal a year ago, and really has developed this defense to a formidable defense that Ohio State's going to have a bunch of different ways to attack.
Let's talk about Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo, 97 and 55 for a moment, because it's certainly the best combination pass rush that the Buckeyes have seen all year. But you could make an argument that even just individually, 1 and 2, I think Ojabo is probably a better pass rusher than George Karlaftis, but maybe doesn't get the same national love. And those two guys are really, really good players. And I would think that Ohio State's offensive success largely depends upon keeping Stroud upright or giving him ample time to throw the football. And that largely means neutralizing those two guys, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And the reason Ojabo probably doesn't get the national press that George Karlaftis got going into the game against Ohio State, he doesn't defend the run very well. He's not a great run defender. You watch him, he'll play in and out of his gap. That's the one issue that this Michigan up front defense has had, where they're supposed to be in a B gap. They're supposed to be in a C gap. They play out of gaps. When they play out of gaps, they put those linebackers who we talked about, their fits. Now they put those guys in a really tough situation. Imagine going to park when you go somewhere, Chipotle at lunch, Brendan. I know you love Chipotle. So you're pulling into a Chipotle. It's 12:05, and you're a glutton for punishment. You know the line's wrapped around the building. You're looking for a parking spot, and you got to park. And now there's a truck there, and you got to park around that truck. But while you got to park around that truck, the truck keeps moving, so you can't get around that truck when you go to park it. That's what these linebackers run into when these guys don't play gap-responsible football. And that's when they give up these runs. And that's what you're going to see Ohio State to try to have that with the counter game, as well as being able to, run at these guys. I think Jabo, if he gets a chance to pin his ears back and go, he's a really talented kid. But the one thing that we're underselling is how good the offensive tackles for Ohio State are.
Absolutely.
These are also the best offensive tackles these guys are going to play against this season thus far. And because of that, I think that we're not giving them enough credit. You watch Hutchinson's stats. He had 3 sacks, I think it was, in the Michigan State game. 2 of those were off boots that were terrible calls by Michigan State, which they tried to run against Ohio State. For some reason, they have this pillow that they have, this boot pillow, where they're like, I just want to run a boot. We'll fake to the one way and we'll naked out. It's not there, guys. It's not. You can't naked around these guys. And that's where Ohio State's going to go some split flow stuff to kind of keep those guys at bay as well. So I think Hutchinson, you watch his motor, the way he plays. I mean, last week, he the first play, I think it's the second play of the Maryland game, when you put that film on, they try to run counter to him. This is what I alluded to in the opener, that stand-up defensive end where they let him play up in 2. He's played a 3-point majority of his time at Michigan. They now let him play in a 2-point to show his flexibility. I think that's why he's probably a day 1 draft pick. And he has the flexibility to play either gap and let that linebacker fit off of it. I say that because also they have him cover the back out of the backfield. I mean, they ran a swing pass to their back, out of the backfield, Maryland did, and he covered it for a tackle for loss. That's freakish. At 6'7", 285 pounds of granite. I mean, this guy can move. He's got great hands. He is the best defensive lineman Ohio State has seen to date, but also he's going against the best offense that he will see until he's playing on Sundays next year.
I know you talked a little bit about the secondary for Michigan. It feels like Brad Hawkins is probably their best defensive back, their safety. What's going to be the key for C.J. Stroud in trying to manipulate the secondary to find open guys? Because we're certainly well versed in the talent that Stroud has to work with on his side of the ball, but there has to be an element of, you need time to throw the football. You need time for those guys to get open. And they have done that repeatedly, but they are going to face again a secondary that's probably one of the better secondaries they've seen this year.
Yeah, I mean, they're loaded. I mean, Hawkins, Gray, Turner, and it's a good defensive secondary. Hill's a good player that they bring in as a nickel. I mean, they've got a lot of good players, but it's going to come back to protecting the quarterback. Like Ohio State has done a great job all year. The other thing that's going to be important is CJ's eyes. And we talk about this every single week. I feel like a broken record after the game. We talk about how well CJ Stroud's eyes go back. And if you get a tight view, when it's on the Herbistrator on Saturday and you're watching this, watch the stripes on his helmet. Watch the stripes on CJ Stroud's helmet. You're going to see those eyes go here. A lot of people don't realize this. The reason people have helmets with stripes or the wing on the back of it is also because they want to see where the quarterback's eyes go. We used to do this, and when I was at schools that didn't have a stripe on their helmet, we'd put a line on the quarterback's head. I do it with the offensive line, too. I'd put a stripe on the top of their helmet, and the reason you do that is now you could see where their eyes are going. You could see, what's the eye discipline? Because you can't see all that, from the other side. And that's really where C.J. Stroud's going to have the ability to be able to do that. And I think it's at his feet. He's proven he can make these big-time throws. And it's going to come back to also the receivers winning. The receivers have to win if they're in man coverage. If they're in the zone, and like I said, early in the beginning, they struggle. They struggle with the smash concept into the boundary, a lot of post routes, looking off these safeties. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how Ryan Day decides to attack this. I think what's going to happen is the beauty of running the smash concepts are that you have a high and a low. You're going to be able to beat cover 3 or cover 4 with it. And I think that's what you're going to see, really him work on. You probably aren't going to see as much mesh as Ohio State traditionally runs. That's all those crossing routes where they run the rub routes. That's when they're seeing somebody that runs man. If they decide to see, a ton of man, then that's when they're going to get into it. A lot of teams have run man against Ohio State because they said, guess what? Like the old Woody Hayes, when you throw the football, 2 things that happen are bad. Of the 3 things that potentially happen when you throw the football. They don't want to let Travion Henderson run all over him. I think they're going to be egotistical enough going into this game, saying that they think they could probably stop the run with their upfront guys and play some zone behind it and be the most complete defense Ohio State has seen thus far.
One more question on this, maybe film breakdown type stuff. What kind of impact can Jeremy Ruckert have this week? And I feel like Ruckert has had weeks where he's been really, really front and center, notable, great games. And I feel like there's been a couple of weeks where he's kind of faded back a little bit in terms of, his overall impact on the game. But I would think that especially in protecting the quarterback, if he's staying in, that he could be really impactful this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a great job protecting all season. He got called for the holding call against Purdue, which was a bogus call, where Kalafdis at the last second kind of gets off of him. But realistically, like, Jeremy Ruckert has got to be that bad dude we saw like the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, I remember you and I, we got on this, and you were like, after air, you were like, all right, you got to stop this Jeremy Ruckert. You're gushing on this guy. Like, I mean, your man crush is on another level on who he is. And I think when you watch Ruckert and where he's at in his development, this is his week to be that bad guy again, to go hit Aiden Hutchinson in the teeth, to hit David, hit 55 in the mouth. I don't want to say his name wrong. I'm sorry. All week I've been watching film on these guys, so I've been going numbers. Aiden, I met him when he was a freshman in high school at Divine Child. Like, he's a different cat. But like, when you see that, and you see that ability for these guys to go and like really go see that, the split flow stuff's going to be important. Can they run counter behind Jeremy Ruckert? Can he give them that ability? And really, this is where Ryan Day is going to want to get into the 12 personnel sets, where he has Stover as the grounded tight end. He has Ruckert as the H off the ball. Can he give him the ability to be the guy that wraps around on the counter? Could you also run? They run like a duo lock play, where that duo play that we talked about. But what they'll do is they'll wrap the tight end around. It's an interesting way to be able to get to it. And so, no, you're not the only one that has a man crush on him. I'm all about him. So, but no, that's where it's going to come into play. And also that split flow is going to also give them the ability to be better in the play action, because that's what happens. The best way to keep defensive ends who are elite pass rushers, which we're going to see, which Ohio State will see tomorrow, is having the ability to have split flow in the backfield, to have action, play action, kind of a semi-roll, not have CJ trying to get out of the pocket, because now you're just asking for problems. He'll never be able to set his feet. He'll be throwing balls into the ground, and then you're going to be, oh, here we go again. And also have the awareness as Ohio State. They have the resiliency. This isn't going to be a video game day. I think they're going to score a lot of points. But to say, like, after the first 7 drives, we're going to see a stat where it's like touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Do I hope that happens? Absolutely. Do I realistically in my head, if we're watching this team on defense, think that's going to happen? I don't. There's a lot going on. You're playing at Michigan. You're playing with a young quarterback who's going to have trouble hearing. That place gets loud. It's 102,000 in that bowl, or 105,000 in that bowl. It's down and below. It'll be a standing room only crowd. I think it's 107, actually. I'm not even credit for it. But anyways, they're going to have that many people there. They're going to be screaming at the top of their lungs. And Ohio State's going to hit a couple big plays early, and it'll deafen that crowd. Nebraska, they let that crowd hang around a little bit, and that kind of kept Nebraska in that game. It's going to be those big plays that they can have. Maybe a Travion Henderson break a big run, something that's going to show them that, like, hey, look, we're still Ohio State, and we being the team, Ohio State, not me. I'm not Ohio State, but the proverbial we, and give them the ability to kind of just set the tone early.
Hey, I think everybody's pretty well versed in Ohio State's big play, explosive ability. Before we flip to the other side of the ball, now is the time to talk about the hilarious, ridiculous, put whatever highly superfluous word you'd like in front of, as an adjective, in front of the snubs for Ohio State's skill position guys. It's funny how the argument all last weekend that you kept hearing nationally was, well, CJ Stroud's, he's got too many options. The team is too good. So, his Heisman candidacy should take a hit because he's got, it's not him, it's everybody else. It's making him look good. And then, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Then a couple of days later, the Bolitnikoff, award watch semifinal, list comes out, and no Olave, no Wilson, no Smith and Jigba. The Doak Walker comes out, no Travion Henderson. Like, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Brendan, it comes back to, like, when you're really good and people just accept that you're really good, I think sometimes they undersell how great you really are. Think about how many times watching LeBron James over the last decade in the NBA, where there are years where LeBron's stats are through the roof. LeBron leads the team to the playoff, whatever it may be. And if you're a LeBron hater, you can put in the chat box, LeBron's this, that, whatever. Whatever you want to say, LeBron's got game. LeBron's had game for a long, long time. And the years where he's not first team All NBA, or the years that he's not, the MVP, or at least in the conversation to be a finalist for the MVP candidate, like, why? Well, it's LeBron. What a great story. Oh, Russ is, or Durant's having a great year, or this guy's having a great year. Like, that's not fair. It's not fair because, they're just really good. Like, we're talking about, Brendan, we're talking about a guy who wasn't on the depth chart at Ohio State, that's a finalist for this award, that he had to transfer out to go find reps. Like, that's insane to think. And no knock from Jameson Williams. He's had a tremendous season down in Tuscaloosa. But to say that these three receivers, it's almost like they knocked themselves out of it. I think that the awards are like, well, can we put all three guys around state? Why not?
Part of the voting process. And like, I get that. It's just stupid.
It's ignorant. And then to have CJ Stroud not in for the max. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think it's another fuel to the fire, another log to put into the proverbial fire at the Woody, where these guys just continue to work. They're disrespected, and they continue to work through it. So, it's disappointing to see it. These guys have played really hard. It's not fair. It's not fair to players that, Chris Olave's. I mean, when you write the memoir of the Chris Olave story at Ohio State, I mean, the fact that there will be pictures of him in the facility forever. I mean, he's going to go down as until Jackson Smith and Jagba probably gets to that point, because of Chris's ability to stay at the university for so long and play with, really multiple different quarterbacks. Like, he's going to go down as, statistically speaking, the best receiver in the history of Ohio State football. And that says a lot. There's been some really talented guys over the years. And to not have him in that conversation, I get not putting Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith and Jagba, because you say, well, you can't put all three in there. But at least Chris Olave's a senior. He's been there. Give him the ability to do that. I mean, the guy scores every 4 touches. Who in the country is not signing up for a receiver that scores every 4 touches? I don't know. I mean, come on. Let's think about this, guys.
Pretty wild. Pretty wild. All right, let's flip to the other side of the ball, because, Ohio State's defense this year, in the first couple weeks, maybe even the first 3 weeks, was not very good. And now the last couple of weeks against both Purdue and Michigan State, the offense stole a lot of the headlines because they threw up, 50-plus points back-to-back games. But frankly, it's the defense's evolvement that I think has me and has a lot of other people around the country believing that this team could win a national championship, because all of a sudden this group is first of all, it's not a liability anymore. It's an above average, statistically above average asset. I don't know if Ohio State's defense is quite on the same level as, what we've seen from Georgia or what we've seen from Wisconsin or even Oklahoma State this year. They probably haven't, on the whole, achieved at consistently the same high level that Michigan has. But the growth from week 1 to week 11 has been off the charts good. And I do expect the Buckeyes to play a good game defensively this week.
Absolutely. And Brendan, it starts with, we talked about this off the air. Our friends at The Athletic wrote a great article talking about the stop rate. And the stop rate, this is getting pretty nerdy about football. So, but what it is a stop rate is a new stat. We've used it probably the last 5 or 6 years in college football. And the reason for it is this. Football is geared towards being explosive on offense. The way that a pass interference call, you call way more defensive pass interferences than offensive pass interferences. It's just the way the game is. It's just the targeting rules now. Players have to be more apprehensive in the way that they tackle people. The game is geared towards offensive football. And part of it is because why? Who sits in and goes, wow, remember that 3-0 game? Man, that was awesome to watch. 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. A botched fumble on a punt. Put them in the red zone. They kick a field goal. But those two teams, wow, what a game. What a game. Like, nobody's tuning in to watch it. I mean, it doesn't sell Fanville. It doesn't sell the different things that are going through this. What it sells is points. And the reason I say this defensive stop rate, these numbers are predicated on the amount of points you give up per drive. So as you're looking at it, Georgia's number 1 in the country. They give up 0.88 points per drive. So the amount of drives that their defense has seen, what they're yielding. I say all this because when Matt Barnes took over the defense for Ohio State, they were ranked 112th in the country. There's 132 Division 1A college football teams on this stat list. They're 112th at Ohio State.
Not good.
Awkward silence. Look around the room. Uh-oh. The Buckeyes are now 13th in the country. Now, take this. If you take the statistical outliers out of those first 3 games of the season, they're number 4, I believe, in the country when I redid the stats. And that's my Case Western Reserve University math. And I don't know how great that is. But I say all that because now you see how different this defense is. They're mixing up coverages. They went from that college-style defense that Ryan Day kind of backhandedly talked about with Don Brown earlier this week, and they're running an NFL-style defense. They're going to mix up coverages. They're going to mix up blitz schemes. They're going to mix up the way their defensive linemen fit the run, the different fits that they have. And I think when you see that, they're playing more confidently. And it's no coincidence. When you start stopping people, guess what happens? Like, you're pretty happy about it as a defense. You always talk about, I talked about this a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. I heard Derek Brooks talk once when he was playing for the Super Bowl Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Derek Brooks, a Hall of Famer, said, our defense, Warren Sapp, John Lynn, I mean, like the guys that were on this defense, I mean, let's talk about drooling about defense. All we asked for was one blade of grass between our heels and that goal line. And I'm not saying Ohio State's there yet, but they're getting awfully darn close. This is why they're a team that everyone's talking about for a national championship contender. Then on the flip side, what we just talked about, Michigan has been great at this. Michigan doesn't give up a lot of points. They've done a good job of defending teams. They condense things down in the red zone. Now, where they get into problems is when they start running some zone coverage and down in the red zone, and teams have been able to pick them apart. So you'll see probably a little bit more man when they get down there this week as a way to try to stop the run. But Ohio State's defense has just done such a good job. And it's going to come back to Haskell Garrett inside. How can Haskell Garrett and the rest of the defensive line inside and the linebackers inside, how can you protect the linebackers and give them the ability to stop the run? Because one of the things that you saw last week against Maryland was the Donovan, the kid that led him in receiving yards, the running back.
Yeah, Donovan Edwards.
Donovan Edwards. I mean, Donovan Edwards was sipping Gatorade 2 weeks ago. They put this kid in, and they kind of let him be the number one read to get out. So what they did was, a lot of times when you watch Michigan and you watch McNamara, traditionally your running back is normally kind of your check down at the end of it. He's looking at him first. You'll watch his eyes. He looks to and I'm looking this way because my back's getting out here. He's going to look right away. If he's not covered, he's going to throw that football. He's going to let him go and go run and go take free yards. And that's what he did. He did it to the tune of 100 plus yards against Maryland last week. Ohio State's going to have an answer for that. Now, Ohio State's not going to sit and cover one the entire game because Kerry Combs is not calling the game. Unless something happens to Matt Barnes between now and noon tomorrow, where they just run man every play. That's not going to happen. So if the Buckeyes played Michigan week 3, we'd have a lot of problems. We'd have a lot of problems with this. But the zone coverage stuff that Ohio State's doing, they're not going to be able to pick them apart with the backs as much. The other matchup issue that's going to be big for them is also being able to see who's going to cover Eric All. Eric All's an Ohio kid. He's from Fairfield High School down in the Cincinnati area. That's turned out Jason Krause, the head coach there. He's turned out a lot of great Division I players. They've gone a lot of places. And some of those guys are now in the National Football League and being very good in the National Football League. Eric All's probably going to do the same thing. Eric All is too big to be covered by a traditional DB, and he's too fast to be covered by a normal linebacker. So it's going to be interesting to see if, how the Buckeyes brought Cody Young in a little bit last week to defend the run. Is he the guy that's going to be kind of the difference maker for them through the cover Eric All? I think Still Chambers probably has the athleticism to cover him. And I don't know if he's got the girth to cover him, but you really don't want to you want Still Chambers to stop the run. Still Chambers is probably one of the best tacklers on the team. And then, Rodney Hickman has had issues at times covering people this year. Say what it is. I love Rodney Hickman. I still got a 14 jersey that's back ordered on eBay from somewhere in Korea, but I know that I'm a big fan of his, but as we're looking at it, I think he's had a couple issues, covering those things. So I think going forward, that's going to be the big matchup for Ohio State. I think the corners are going to do a good job. I really do. I mean, to think that Denzel Burke didn't play corner until this season is ridiculous. I mean, the kid sat out a senior year of high school. I mean, the kid was playing wide receiver, and then to have the wherewithal. Hey, we're going to have this kid start for us and come here and be a guy because of his competitiveness is really enticing. I think he's going to be good. He'll be able to do his thing. Cameron Brown said, has done a really good job as well. So you're going to see the corners be able to play good football. It's going to come back to the linebackers. And I hate to say it. I've been preaching these guys all week. I've been putting them up. But I think it's going to be how the linebackers play that matchup. And not only the run fits, but also can they stop the running back and the tight end in the passing game. Those are the two big things. I'm not as much concerned about them going forward. So
yeah, this is a good question here from It's Just Me, Tim. Craig Young, a good matchup for the tight end. Craig Young, I think, is Ohio State's most physical specimen in the defensive secondary. He is a big dude, and for his size, he can really, really move. I kind of like that idea, to be honest with you. I wouldn't mind seeing Craig Young play against all at all.
Yeah, and they used him. I mean, they used him in Michigan State, as a way to kind of stop the run. And you put him in the game, it's going to force him to stop the run a little bit more. And he's just going to be a better fitter, I think, from there. And as he goes forward with it, we'll see what kind of goes there. You can't have Tommy Eichenberg chasing Eric all around the entire day. That's not Tommy's game. Tommy's played really well for Ohio State. He's becoming a much better player, but that's where you have to see him develop. And maybe, the Palo Alto, who hasn't really played much for Ohio State, it's kind of a disappointment this year. If he's able to maybe, have a way of, I butchered his name. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry. There you go. Sorry.
Oh, I love you.
Well, hey, when you start making plays, I'll say it right. He's also a guy that, they brought in as a scholarship guy that really hasn't added as much value as you'd hoped at this point.
Sure. Look, I think you mentioned Haskell Garrett. I think Ohio State's pressure that they can put on Cade McNamara is largely going to predicate how well everybody else behind the defensive line is going to play. And as Ohio State, as you look back where they were at the beginning of the season, weeks 1, 2, and frankly, even for parts of the game in week 3, the defensive line just didn't dominate. Now, by the end of the game, they looked really good against Tulsa, and the defensive line totally overpowered Akron's offensive line. And it kind of felt like they haven't looked back since then. They've had some big sack totals and tackle for loss totals. Michigan's offensive line has only given up 9 sacks all year in 11 games. So they've proven that they can do a pretty good job of keeping Cade McNamara on his feet and J.J. McCarthy when he gets a few snaps. And to Michigan's credit, they really haven't turned the ball over very much. It's probably the best thing I can say about their offense, which has been good, not great, and certainly not elite, but pretty good. Can you shine a spotlight on, just how important this week is for Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison and Jerron Cage and Teron Vincent and right on down the line to try to disrupt some things at the line?
Yeah, I mean, allowing McNamara not to set his feet. I don't see J.J. McCarthy playing a lot in this game. He had those fumbles against the Michigan State game, and ever since then, they really haven't used him as much. That's another part I omitted from that game. He had a couple huge turnovers in that game that kind of flipped the script on that game. But it's going to be able to get pressure home, and you have to have faith in the fact that your defensive ends can go beat these guys one-on-one. Because they're going to work on, Josh Gaddis, Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, offensive line coach for Michigan, does a lot of crossing and rub route stuff to get ready to beat man stuff. But as the Buckeyes sit there in a lot of their zone stuff, I don't think that's going to be a great attack plan. I mean, it's going to give them a couple windows, but realistically, if they can tee off and get one-on-ones with these defensive line, sending 4, adding on a Steel Chambers, adding on a Tommy Eichenberg at different times, adding on different players to be able to get home is going to really keep them off schedule. And I think the biggest thing is make this team live in 3rd and long, choke out the run on 1st and 2nd down, because that's the other thing Michigan's going to try to do. Michigan's going to try to run the football. They've played complementary football the entire season. Their only chance of winning this game is by running the football effectively on Ohio State and forcing the Buckeyes to have the most electrifying offense, arguably in the history of college football. Stand there on the sideline and look at each other and get cold and wait while this team turns out 11, 12-minute drives. And even if they get a field goal out of it, that's fine. That's what they want, because they're going to be able to get just eating up the clock as they get into it. I think that's going to be a big stat as the time of possession at the end of this thing. I don't foresee them sitting back and trying to throw the football as much. Sometimes those stats, 9, as you're looking at it, last week, they felt pretty good against a Maryland defense. I think they gave up 1 sack against Maryland. I think they threw the ball, a total of, 40 times, but it was more so they threw the ball 40 times because it was late. I mean, McNamara had 28 attempts. McCarthy came in for a little bit, and, the different guys that they let in, but I really think that it's going to be an interesting going forward to see, how Ohio State is able to generate pressure. I think you let Harrison, you let 9 and 11 go and eat on the edge. You don't have to get them involved in the zone games. Let the inside guys move around a little bit. Work on the different picks. And that's one of the things that you saw Maryland do last week is they're going to run a sort protection a lot. So Michigan does a big thing where they'll go a 5-man or 6-man protection. And what they do with the sort is the guard will end up reading, the guard will read the linebacker to the down defensive lineman. The tackle is going to read the down defensive lineman to the stand-up rush in. Maryland did a nice job last week of being able to disguise that a little bit, and I'm sure Matt Barnes has got some ways that he's going to figure out, especially when they get into empty, of ways to build to cultivate that and having the ability to go after them that way and really put these offensive linemen and confuse them. Because that's the other thing, is that these offensive linemen, I mean, as you prepare guys every single week, they watch so much film on safety alignment, on linebacker alignment, on tendencies of blitz, different tendencies, tells by guys. I mean, you would not believe how many times you watch on film where you see a guy's one foot's up or another foot's up, or you see a different lean, or you see the way his head looks. I mean, that gives you a little bit of an indicative, precursor, if you will, the cliff notes, to let you know they're going to blitz, or they're going to bring something from that area, or they're going to bring some kind of twist or stunt. I really think that Ohio State is going to have to do that this week against Michigan to kind of confuse them a little bit, get home a couple times. If you can get home once or twice with some sacks, it really gets Michigan off schedule and it really kills their drive.
Michigan's run the ball well this year, to your point about them wanting to establish the run. I mean, Hassan Haskins is a 1,000-yard rusher. Blake Corum is at almost 800 yards. They're basically at 1,800 yards, just over that, I think, combined. And they've combined for 23 touchdowns. Those guys are basically running the ball for 180-ish yards per game. I have to think that has to be, first and foremost on their game plan. Like, if they can't establish a run, they're going to get way too predictable, way too one-dimensional, and the Buckeye defense has gotten good enough to the point where it's going to be hard for Michigan to move the football. So I would be stunned if they don't try to pound the ball on the ground a little bit, right away out of that first drive. But how effective can those guys be against maybe the best defense they've seen all year outside of Wisconsin? I look at Michigan and I think about, the wins that they've had that have kind of, I guess, impressed me. Last week was probably their best win, I would say. I mean, I realized the score was kind of a blowout, but it just, start to finish, it was a complete game for them. They played really solid. I thought their win over Wisconsin was not as good as the score would indicate. I said that even at the time. I wasn't super impressed by that, but, give them credit for the win. And I thought their win over Penn State was a good win.
Yeah.
Those are the three games that, if I'm a Buckeye fan looking at Michigan, those are the three games that I'm saying, okay, this is where we saw some good flashes from this team. Their win over Washington has not looked nearly as good. They beat up on a couple of smaller schools at the beginning of the year that, whatever. I don't really care. I mean, Western Michigan and Northern Illinois
Northern Illinois won the MAC West. Easy there.
Great. Didn't excite
Western Michigan beat Pitt.
Yeah, they did. I just there were moments throughout the course of the year where I've been waiting to see what Michigan's offense is capable of. And I mean, I don't want to take anything away from them. They're good. They have certainly been good enough to earn a number 5 national ranking, and they've lost only once. And you could make an argument they shouldn't have lost the game they lost. I just don't think they are at the level yet that they need to be to compete for a Big Ten championship and make the college football playoff. And before we get away from their offense, I want to talk about specifically Cade McNamara, because, I mean, Tommy, it's no secret. I mean, under Jim Harbaugh, the number one problem for him is that he hasn't had that guy at quarterback. If he had better quarterback play, he probably isn't 0-5 against the Buckeyes. He probably has had more top 15 wins than he's put together, where he's basically lost just about every time they've played a meaningful game, in November or later. What do you like about Cade McNamara? What are his weaknesses? Where can the Buckeyes try to mess with him?
He's done a good job of not turning the football over. I think he's only thrown 2 picks on the season.
Yep.
He's not a touchdown maker, and I think he's thrown for 14 touchdowns, which I know is 14 touchdowns, but 14 touchdowns in the Big Ten, when you've run, what is it now? We're in week 12. That's not as, he's played in 11 games with 14 touchdowns. That's not like eye-popping stats. He's going to throw the ball for 194 yards. It's not turning the football over. He doesn't turn the football over. When you don't turn the football over, you rely on that good run game that you do. It sets up play action for you. and he's a patient kid. He doesn't get flustered. He doesn't scramble a lot in the pocket. I think he does a really nice job when it comes to that at the quarterback position. Where he does struggle is when people don't get open. If people play coverage on them and they don't get open, that's when you see him kind of bob, like Maryland last week a little bit. He started bobbing around. He created his own scramble that he really didn't need to. And until that happens, I don't think he's the trigger man. They just don't, and all this comes back to, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit off topic, but it's Jim Harbaugh recruiting the quarterback position. Brendan, you've talked to Jim Harbaugh at length. I mean, Jim Harbaugh stole 45 minutes of my life that I'll never get back, that you actually ran the interview on, because the guy just went on this tangent about how he got beat up in like grade school football or whatever. He's a different cat. And when that comes to recruiting, it's really hard for him to sell Michigan. He can't sell Tom Brady. He didn't develop Tom Brady. He can't. What's he going to sell to these recruits to tell them to come to Michigan over Ohio State? If you're a kid and you're sitting there and you go, who do I want to go play for? I want to go play for Ryan Day, who's this guy who wins big games, who develops quarterbacks, who gets them to go play in the National Football League. And really, I mean, the jury's still out on what Justin Fields' NFL career is going to be like. You could say what you want about, Haskins and all the other different players that we've had over the last couple of years. But realistically, we're pretty confident C.J. Stroud's going to be an NFL player one day. One of those backups that are in the facility right now will probably end up being one. I mean, gosh, they had a 2024 kid on campus the other day. The 2022 kid just decommitted from USC, who did an official visit the week before. I mean, that's the big difference now. Michigan's not beating Ohio State when it comes to getting the guy at quarterback. They went after Drew Allar, the kid in Medina, who's the best, in-state quarterback.
Yeah, he's a real deal. He's in fact, I think he's going to have a really good career at Penn State. I mean,
I agree. I think Drew's a really good player, and they missed on him too. They couldn't get him. They couldn't lock him up, and Penn State was able to do that. I really think it's important that until they figure out how to recruit that quarterback, how to get that guy. I know it's hard. I've been an offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at places, and when I go in to talk to a quarterback, a lot of times they look at me and they go, "How the heck are you going to develop me?" And it's funny. Like I've had, unfortunately, Tim Boyle, who started for the Detroit Lions last week, I had him at Little Eastern Kentucky, an FCS school, and he's playing in the NFL. Now, he didn't play great on Saturday, or on Sunday rather, and I loved him. But it comes back to being able to recruit that position. And McNamara he's a good player. He probably fits their system right now because he doesn't turn the football over. But he's not a guy that's going to go win the game. Like C.J. Stroud has the ability and the moxie to go win a football game, to go make big throws, to make those moments, as we talk about those Heisman moments. And that's what you're hoping to see this weekend. McNamara doesn't have that. It's not in his DNA. It's not his gene. He's a great player, and a lot of people would love to have him, but he's just not that guy. And, I give him the credit for not turning the football over, but he's not going to lose you the game. He's definitely not going to win you the game. And I could eat crow on Sunday. What we learned, if Cade McNamara throws for 400 yards against the Buckeyes and has 5 touchdowns, I'll be right there. I already admitted this week I was wrong in the college football playoff. Michigan was sitting on the outside looking in. I wanted to up the ratings. They gave it to Cincinnati. God bless Cincinnati. I'm excited for Luke. And those guys have done a tremendous job this year. But until Cade McNamara changes that, he's still just a guy. And they rotate him out. That's the other thing about quarterbacks. When you're rotating at the quarterback position, Brendan, you don't have a guy. You don't have the guy. We've talked about this. When you rotate your quarterbacks, you don't have the guy. It was the same thing up front on the offensive line. They're rotating with Paris Johnson and Jones and Mumford and all these guys. They're going through the whole season until they figured out how to solidify this thing. They made it really difficult on them. But in a long-winded response, Cade McNamara, you're doing a great job. Don't turn the football over. And you still got a chance of playing in the Peach Bowl, brother. So keep getting after it.
Yeah, and that's the part of this that I keep going back to as well. Like the mixed signals that it must be sending Cade that JJ's getting snaps regularly, right? I mean, I'm sure within the walls of Michigan's facility that they're, telling Cade McNamara, look, you're the guy. We're trying to develop this other guy, but you're the guy. They have to be telling him that. But there has to be, I don't know, man, if you're the starting quarterback at a school like Michigan and you're getting pulled out of the game when you're still in the heat of the game, like that wouldn't sit well with me. It shouldn't sit well with a starting quarterback. So, I'm not going to even pretend to know what the dynamic is, behind closed doors between Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy. I know that Michigan is desperate to find the guy. And maybe JJ McCarthy turns into that guy in a couple of years. It's possible. Certainly, extremely highly recruited coming out of high school, and he seems to have a lot of the intangibles. So maybe that's the guy, but I don't know. I totally agree with if you're playing two guys, it's because you don't have a guy, and I don't think it has come back to bite Michigan this year. The reality is, Tommy, after what last year looked like, and all of the people that were calling for Jim Harbaugh's head last year, justifiably so, if they go 10-2, that's a pretty darn good turnaround. And then they're going to go play in a meaningful bowl game, and they might get Notre Dame, and maybe it's, I don't know, the Rose Bowl or whatever. If they win a bowl game and they only lose 2 games, now those 2 games in that instance would be to their 2 rivals. Like that sucks, but it sure feels like a heck of a lot of improvement from where they were the year prior. Maybe that's good enough for now. I don't know. I mean, no Michigan fan is going to tell you that it's good enough to just compete with Ohio State, but perhaps the reality here is that, they've made enough progress that they're going to keep going with the staff that they've got. It's going to be very interesting to follow what's going on in Ann Arbor this offseason, because as we transition here a little bit, Mel Tucker got that 10-year, $95 million contract after all. And James Franklin just signed a massive, massive contract extension of his own. These head coaches in the Big Ten are starting to make some serious coin. Ryan Day's contract is a good contract for sure, but he's got to be sitting around going, I haven't lost to any of these guys yet. Show me the money. And I don't know this for fact, but I have to think that Ryan Day is not leaving Ohio State with the exception of very few opportunities. Maybe the day that Bill Belichick decides he's done in New England, if it's a chance for Ryan to go to the NFL and go live back closer to home, maybe that's a draw away. But every time I think about it, I'm reaching, because who's got it better right now in the country than Ryan Day? Absolutely nobody. And Nick Saban, I guess, but Nick Saban's career is far, far deeper than where Ryan's is. Nick Saban, he can't have, I would certainly think he's got less than 10 years left as a head coach. But who knows how long he wants to stick around. But Ryan Day should be coaching college football or coaching in the NFL for another 30 years if he wants to. Nobody's got it better than he does. And some of the contracts that are getting thrown around in the Big Ten here are eye-popping. And so it makes you wonder what Jim Harbaugh's thought process is around all that. I realize his contract was restructured last offseason, and it's pretty heavily incentivized, and that's fine because of what happened last year for Michigan. But some of the deals that are getting put together for James Franklin and Mel Tucker in particular had me raising both eyebrows.
Brendan, I see this, and I see these different. He loses by 50 to Ohio State, and they reward him with this gaudy contract. And it literally comes back to when we talked about Keith Jackson. Oh, Nelly, it's a crazy one. They're paying these guys more money than I ever dreamed possible. But as you see that, I think what's important, that's for you, Jason. I think you mean Keith Jackson, not Tom Jackson. I'm not sure. But I say all that because I think Ohio State has to figure out a way to make Ryan Day the most comfortable man in college football. And the reason I say that is because Ryan Day is 42 years old. They're paying him $7.6, $7.8 million. Now it's when you start adding in the access to private planes. I don't know. You got it, Jason. I don't know if he's a big traveler. He doesn't seem like a style guy. He doesn't seem like he's got. I don't even know what his hobbies are. No one knows his hobbies are football. That he's a football guy. There's something you have to do to entice him to keep him in Columbus. Because like I said before, those are the things that are going to burn him out, is being on the phone, is talking to recruits day in and day out, because you have to be relentless in that. If you're not, that's what they're paying these guys to do. Those guys, a lot of these guys don't even drive to work anymore. Somebody picks them up because they're on the phone constantly. Their entire day is mapped out. It's for the Division III level up to Power 5 Division I. Your head coach better be on the phone with somebody all the time. It's exhausting, but that's your job as a CEO of a football program. You have to constantly be motivating and talking to the kids, not only in your program, but the kids you're trying to attract to your program to make that work. And I think when you see that develop and you see that grow, they're going to have to pay him something. I don't know if Victoria's Secret becomes Ryan's Secret. I don't know what the next thing is. I don't know. I'm trying to think of big boosters, that you have, that are looking through it. And I probably gave everybody a visual that they never thought they would have.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But it's going to be something that they have to do to entice Ryan. One of the things that Nick Saban, they did with him in Alabama, they bought him a house that's his forever. Do you buy him a forever home? Do you buy him a forever home in Columbus? Do you ask him where he wants to live and build him his house? And Ryan Day doesn't rub me as that kind of guy. I know, Brendan, you've had way more interactions than what I have with him. Mine's with Coach, how are you? I mean, that's the extent of it. I don't really know him that well, but I'm assuming there's got to be something you can do to entice him to stay, because you do have to pay him. Like, you have to. You have to pay him. I tell this all the time. Like, you got to recruit your wife every single day. If you're not recruiting your wife, like, guess what happens? Eventually, your wife's like, he doesn't love me anymore. I'm going to join the transfer portal. Like, I mean, the people have been doing it forever. It's one of the oldest sins in the book. So what you have to look at as you're growing is, make it worth his while, make his family really comfortable in Columbus, and really hope that you can hold on to this. We talked about it last week. Does he go in the ring? Is he a guy that when it's all said and done, you look back and you go, wow, Ryan Day, what a great testament to Ohio State football. Really, the only thing I could see knocking him off right now is, God forbid, something happens off the field with one of the players. Because, I mean, realistically, Tress, like, I don't think any of us ever thought Tress would leave. Tress fell on the sword, and there's a lot of people, and I don't want to blow up the comment box on this. I know a lot of people have opinions on this, but, and in today's day and age, that wouldn't even be an issue.
No.
But, the way the game is cultivated now, the issues you're running into are your players' conduct off the field. It has nothing to do with financial. It's how they treat other people. And if Ryan Day is a leader of men the way I think he is, and the way he's developing these guys as human beings, I think that's what you're going to see. And you'll see these guys go forward and this incredible legacy that he can potentially have.
What are your earliest memories of Ohio State, Michigan, and how did you learn the rivalry? Maybe we shift away a little bit from the game itself, but like the reason I ask this is because everybody feels like they've got those stories, right? This is for Ohio State and for Michigan fans. This thing is so personal, right? It's intimate, it's familial. You learn it typically at a pretty young age. It becomes so ingrained in who you are. It doesn't matter if it's week one, you're looking forward to that game. And Ohio State hasn't lost to Michigan in well over 3,500 days. And Ohio State fans know that because it matters to us. So I'm just curious, where and when and how did you learn about this rivalry?
It's funny you say that. My mother went to Ohio State, and my dad was actually a police officer growing up, and my dad hated Ohio State. My dad loathed Ohio State. I grew up in a household, and I think part of it was like my dad trolled my mom about it. I really think that's where it came from. I mean, to the point my mom had this like Ohio State jersey for me as a kid that I remember, like, he put it on our dog. Like, he put it, like, we had a Cocker Spaniel that he put my jersey on. He says the dog will wear the jersey. Like, you're not wearing the Ohio State jersey. Like, my dad absolutely hated Ohio State football. Probably my earliest memory, might be, 1990. I think Ohio State played Michigan. I think that was at Ohio State. Buckeyes ended up losing that game. They ended up losing to like Air Force, and Ohio State wasn't great then. It was the John Cooper era. That's probably my earliest memories of really Ohio State football. I always knew it was going to be on ABC, and it comes back to, you got excited because you heard, Keith Jackson we talked about him already, and down the banks of the old Olentangy, the Buckeyes play the game. As the boys from up north will come down and try to show them they're still the winningest team in college football history. Here on ABC, coming at you. And it's like, as you go do that, and it's like, I think it's like, it's hard to, it's probably my earliest memory of Ohio State football. I know probably going to Ohio State would have been my mother would have been really excited about it. I wasn't good enough to play at Ohio State. I think Jim Tressel offered me like a walk-on spot at a banquet my senior year because I could bench press a house, but I had no business playing at Ohio State. And I knew where I belonged. And I think that's probably my earliest memory of really Ohio State football. I think the game was 16-13. You could check it. I know we had Google. So But that was really my earliest memory of the Buckeyes. How about you, Brendan?
I've always attached the beginning of my Ohio State Michigan rivalry memories to setting up the Christmas tree in my house. My family is Christmas crazy, always have been. It's rarely too early to start celebrating the Christmas season. And I don't know if I attach it to a single game or a single moment as much as, we just made it a priority that, the Ohio State Michigan game was a day that we watched the game together as a family, and we put the Christmas tree up in the house. And that was the only thing going on that day. There's nothing else that could possibly get in the way of it. I watched a lot of those games with my dad and with my brothers. And my mom, who is a fan of her husband and kids, but not really a football fan. She would watch, she would pay attention. It was just, to me, it goes back to like my family. And, my dad is not an Ohio State alum, but I have several extended family members who are Buckeye alums. I've loved Ohio State as long as I can remember. I didn't go to Ohio State, but I have worked there as an independent contractor covering a lot of their other sports, and certainly doing this for several years. And I, it's always been part of my DNA to follow Ohio State football. One of my favorite memories of the Buckeyes is when I was a kid, the 2002 national title game. Obviously, so I was born in 91, right? So I guess I was not quite yet 11. I was born in March of 91. So I would have been 10 years old when Ohio State, beat Miami. And I remember watching that game with my dad. And when the final incomplete pass fell and the Buckeyes won in double overtime, I will never forget the borderline pain, but my hands stinging from like the two-hand overhead high five that we gave each other. Like I could feel the pain down in my elbow. My hands hurt so bad. And it stuck around for too long, but it was like, you attach, some of those feelings to the euphoria of those moments. And Ohio State's been pretty darn good ever since then. 2/3 of my life, the Buckeyes have been among the elites of college football, and it's certainly been fun to follow them. But the Ohio State-Michigan game, I always attach to the memory of putting up a Christmas tree and watching it with my family. So kind of fun.
Brendan, the further that I married a Buckeye. So my wife is an Ohio State Buckeye, graduated from it. My in-laws love Ohio State football. My mother, like I said, still loves Ohio State football. My family, for the most part, are big Buckeye fans. And I've at my wedding, we played Hang On Sloopy, and everyone did the OHIO. My buddies that are Notre Dame and Michigan fans, I sat there like this, the over-exaggerated. But yeah, I think it's important. I think no matter who you are, growing up in this great state, football is really important to all of us. And this rivalry, dates back to really the Battle of Toledo. And I think a lot of people know this. And if you don't know it, here's a little history lesson for you. Ohio State and Michigan have hated each other, or the state of Ohio and the state of Michigan have hated each other for a long time. Geographically, when you look at a map, Toledo belongs where? In Michigan. Like the way the lake hits it, it belongs up in Michigan. But Ohio, we beat them. We had a battle of Ohio and Michigan that to this day we still celebrate at noon on Saturdays after Thanksgiving. And it's amazing how history and pride in where you come from. And this is one of the things, no matter where you go, and Brendan, you and I have talked about this a million times. When you grow up in the state of Ohio, there's a couple things that people ask you. If you're from Northeast or Southwest Ohio, they ask you where you went to high school. Those are really important. If you're from Cincinnati or from Cleveland, the Akron area, hey, where'd you go to high school? The rest of the state, hey, where'd you go? OHIO. Like, it's just the way we're raised. And I think it's important, and it means so much to so many people that don't even care about football, like you said. So it's going to be a fun game. And then now for us that are football junkies, you have the number 2 team, playing the number 5 team in the country. At noon, it's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch and watch these teams battle. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, time to give our predictions. I'm pretty sure last week I went first, although off the top of my head, I can't remember. So I'm going to let you go first here this week. What do you think?
I got the Buckeyes 45, Michigan 27. I think the Buckeyes pull away from them. I think they're going to score early. I think Michigan will rally back by running the football. I don't think they're going to try to abandon that running game plan. They've seen other teams do that where they start trying to throw the football. They go 3 and out. Michigan State was a great example of that. I think they're going to try to stick with the run and use the clock as their best friend to stay close in this game because that's one of the other things about Jim Harbaugh, the hallmarks of Jim Harbaugh's seasons the last couple of years. Even if they make it to a big bowl game, he has a deflated team who's been embarrassed by Ohio State these last couple of years. And when they lose this game so badly, they have a month to think about it. Then they go home for the holidays. They hear how bad they are. Then they're trying to get ramped up to go play a team that they don't know a ton about. It's going to be an interesting game. But like I said, I 45, 27. I'll take the Buckeyes.
My score prediction is eerily similar. I have kind of wavered back and forth between, knowing Ohio State is probably capable of putting up 50. They've done that routinely. But also thinking that Michigan, if they can establish a run, and I'm not talking about running for 200 yards, but if they have enough of a run game that the clock keeps moving, and with their propensity to not turn the ball over, that maybe the Buckeyes would struggle to put up gaudy offensive numbers because the game would shrink a little bit. And so I've kind of landed on 45-24. I think Ohio State, and they're certainly capable of scoring a defensive touchdown, but I don't think they're going to have one this week because Michigan really hasn't turned the ball over very much. But I think 6 offensive touchdowns and a field goal for Ohio State is plenty achievable. And I think Michigan is probably going to put together, a better offensive performance than what Ohio State has seen from most of their opposition this year. I'll say right now, I think Michigan's a better team than Oregon, and maybe that becomes a little more obvious after Oregon got curb stomped by Utah. But I think Michigan's the best team that Ohio State will have seen to date. And some of that is because offensively, they're pretty good. They're not great. They're certainly not elite, but they're pretty good. And they're coming off of a huge game in which they're probably going to be playing with a lot of confidence, knowing what they just did to Maryland last week. So I like 45-24. I think that's kind of where I'm settling. So we didn't talk about this ahead of time. We were off. No. Although that's happened a couple times this year. We've been pretty much on the same wavelength.
Yeah. So, victory is a victory. So hopefully we're both right.
Yep. Yeah. And if Ohio State can do that, they'll find themselves playing for a Big Ten championship, trying to win it again next week. This is the Ohio State Football Conference with the rest of the Big Ten trying to knock off the Buckeyes. The good news is if Ohio State wins this week, they're going to have a chance to defend a Big Ten title and certainly will have a chance to go to the college football playoff. Look, the loser this week, it's going to sting. There's one game left if you lose, and it's a bowl game, and it's not going to feel well. It's going to feel like an irrelevant bowl game because the standard, the expectation is college football playoff and national championship. And Ohio State has to figure out a way to win this week. The good news is they've done everything up to this point to keep all of their long goals in front of them, right? This team all the time talks about beat the team up north, get to Indianapolis, make the college football playoff. Those are their 3 goals. And if you do all 3 of those things, you got a real good chance to win the national championship. And here we are now on November 26th as we shoot this, November 27th, tomorrow, the game. And you've put 4 months worth of work together from the beginning of camp to where you are now. And all of your goals are still achievable, even if you stubbed your toe early in the season. Part of what is so fun to watch college football is to watch the growth and the progress throughout the year of young guys that are trying to make it work, trying to figure it out. And this team has grown an awful lot throughout the course of the season. It's been awfully fun to watch them. All right. There's your pretty in-depth preview of the Ohio State and Michigan game coming up Saturday at noon. It'll be at the Big House. We'll be there. We're looking forward to bringing you live coverage after the game's over with our instant analysis post-game show. Obviously, we'll have the press conferences, and then we'll go live shortly thereafter. I certainly hope you'll join us for that. If you haven't subscribed to our content on YouTube, that would certainly really help us. We would appreciate that support. Set your notifications so that you get a notification on your phone and you'll know when we're live so that we can interact with you. We love a lot of the comments in the chat box and certainly would like to address some questions and some things post-game tomorrow if you want to join us. So hope you'll consider that. You can follow us on our social media accounts at BuckeyesNow SI on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, on YouTube, and of course over on BuckeyesNow.com. For Tommy Zagorski, I'm Brendan Gulick. Ohio State and Michigan. Doesn't really need much of an introduction. Pretty fired up for a big game tomorrow. We'll see you up at the Big House, 12 noon Eastern time. The game is televised on Fox, and we'll talk to you live post-game. Enjoy the game, everybody. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All-Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.